Welcome and good evening to the Thorough channel, and I'm here tonight with my good Twitter mutual, SD Wickett. How are you doing, sir?
I'm well, Farah. Thanks for having me on.
No problem at all. As those who frequent the Thorough channel may know, I've been uploading a lot less and with random things recently, but I was recently inspired to pull a stream together to kind of talk about the world of books and to have a little kind of interview and chat with Sam about what he's been up to, his new book launch, etc. So should be a relatively short stream, but maybe let's dive straight into it. And Sam, it'd be great to hear a little bit about yourself, about your background, and kind of how did you get into the world of writing. And for some people I know, they had this kind of like road to Damascus moment in terms of literature was going to be a big part of their lives at a certain point, but for others it was kind of like a gradual built up thing. Were you always interested in writing and reading from an early age, or what was that like?
Yeah, so the sort of the short answer is it was just something that I was always drawn to. I recall writing a story when I was about 5 or 6 in school, and that winning a county-wide prize. So that was kind of like, I suppose, the first time that I could do it. And then from there, it sort of just stuck with me, and any kind of brief teenage phase that I would go through, I would sort of try and turn into fiction. But then I was quite fortunate in that I had a teacher who noticed that in me in school and sort of nurtured that. And his main advice to me was, don't write a novel till your mid-20s, because until then you have nothing worth saying.
That's some good advice. Just immediately jumping on that, I don't know if you're familiar with some of AA's writing, but he quite famously wrote a dystopian novel when he was 16, all about like people he knew at school at all. What kind of stuff were you writing when you were 16 or 17?
Yeah, see, that is quite funny because I did the same thing. I didn't know that about AA. I did basically the same thing. A little bit older, more like 19, 20, but I wrote a it's funny actually. I wrote a dystopian novel that if it had been published, even like 50, 100 years ago, and it resurfaced today, it would have been like oh my god, this author predicted like COVID and vaccine mandates and that sort of thing, because that's kind of what it's about.
Okay, interesting.
And I found it years later, and I read it back, and it's just the most insufferable 19-year-old thinking he's deep.
You get that a little bit with AA's one as well, but there is quite a lot of it's so cringe, it's quite funny kind of thing. And
oh yeah, it's great. It's just it's really embarrassing to read. Maybe one day I'll post it online just to kind of
that's it exactly. Post it anonymously. That's right. what about poetry? Were you ever into writing poetry? Any love songs for?
Yeah, no, I had a phase of writing poetry, and then I kind of realized I wasn't good at it at all. I thought, again, it's one of those things where you think what you're doing is dreadfully important, very vital. People need to see this, and then a few years pass, and you look back at it, and you're like, oh, what is this crap? I think I was just trying things on really as a writer. I mean, as well as doing the novels and long form fiction work. I do. I write a monthly column in Bournemouth magazine, and so I sort of found out that those two are kind of where I'm actually able to do what I like to think is good work.
Okay, interesting. Like, who would you say were some of your kind of like lighthouse literary figures, growing up, but then maturing as well? Were there always people that kind of stayed with you, or again, different people? Some people have different phases, and as they kind of grow up, etc. What was it like for you?
Yeah, so the first, so there's a handful that I kind of had at a period of time in my late teens, early 20s, when it was really kind of re-emerging out of me, and some of those stayed and most left. I mean, the ones that stuck around are writers like I think obviously people like Evelyn Waugh, Somerset Maugham, the John Williams novel Stoner had a very big impact on me. Writers that I kind of picked up and then kind of sort of not quite stuck with. I'm quite embarrassed to say it, but also not, because I'm aware that I was quite young, but I was very much a reader of Ayn Rand's novels for a period there in my late teens. Not necessarily Atlas Shrugged, but the Fountainhead, We the Living, Anthem were quite big impacts on me. Albert Camus as well. Again, I think there are a lot of writers that I read at the right age to read them.
Yeah, I think Rand's quite idealistic, and also kind of like it's quite different to other stuff that's out there. So like I think especially as a teenager, or whatever, I think it definitely captures you. So like I think everyone's down on her because of her political views, while as a Lolbertarian, but I don't know. Like I quite like some of her stuff. I think it's not too bad, and it's certainly a little bit different, interesting. I want to go back to War a second, because I think he is a massively underrated and sort of like genuinely important figure. In kind of like when's he operating? Like, is it like the 20s to the 40s? Is it basically?
I think his first novel was in the late 20s, and then Brideshead, the book he's most known for, was 1945. So I think his kind of stomping ground is like 20s to the early to mid 60s, I believe. I think he died in the mid 60s.
Yeah, and like I mean, I would describe this work as kind of like witty, satirical. It's culture critique. It is I know, like character vignettes. It's like people from his adventures and that he's met. It's laughing at like class, laughing at society. It's about degradation. It's about the kind of last springtime. There's something this kind of like last blooming is that's how I kind of feel with a lot of the stuff. I don't know about yourself. How do you describe them?
Yeah, so it depends on which kind of era of him you're looking at. I mean, his earlier novels, again, books like Vile Bodies or Decline of Fall, for instance, like his first two published novels. They are, I suppose you can call them comedy of manners, right? They satirize the time he was living in, particularly Vile Bodies, which is about the milieu of young socialites that he was a part of, himself being
there's a name for those guys. It's like the young beautiful people.
The bright young people.
Bright young things. They get
so he was a social climber. He was the son of a very middle class publisher in North London. But he was kind of ingrained within these often aristocratic circles. He was very shaped by the arrival of a bunch of sort of aesthetes from Eton to Oxford in the early 20s as well. And then so I suppose I think it was like lovingly satirized, right? Or either that, or his...
I think that's a really good way of putting it, because I think you can laugh at something in like character types or whatever without being like, and therefore I want this removed or taken down, and like that's the impression I get. I mean, I love that kind of bright young things period, because it's just like there is a real like freshness and like post-war optimism, but a dark naivety to it, and a kind of depravity and like a real nastiness. They're kind of like the best but the worst, at the same time. So
which is interesting, because by the time he gets to Brideshead, again, it's the mid 40s. The war is either about to end or has just ended. I think I recall him writing about the novel that he wrote it almost in protest of rationing, or in protest of short supply, or wartime pinch, right? Because it's a very floral novel. It's a very expressively written novel. I mean, I think it has some of the finest passages of prose of the entire century that it was written in. And obviously it's one of the themes of that novel is nostalgia for what he called the golden age of aristocracy, which is, I think, can now be viewed as the supernova, right? Where
it is, yeah, 100%.
It was this kind of last kind of flash of light before the Great Depression carried off many families. So too did losing heirs during the Great War. And there's interesting. Obviously, I presume most people who are listening to this have read that novel, as have you. It's bookended by his experiences in the sort of late stages of the war, as he's some sort of domestic like battalion or something like that. And his subordinate is a guy called Hooper, who's I think he's like sort of working class, and he scoffs at the size of the house being for one family, and it's almost sort of about how I think he refers to the time he's living in, that being Charles Ryder, the protagonist, as the age of Hooper. So he knows that the party, so to speak, is over. And it's this very kind of I think it's at times very somber and kind of melancholic.
There's a fatalistic element to it as well. It's kind of
absolutely.
He knows what's going to happen, but again, it's just kind of like carrying on as normal. Well, I don't want to dwell on war too much,
sure.
But again, for me, I think he's a really sort of overrated, underrated kind of figure. He is well known and well loved, but I feel like he should be looked at and assessed more. I think there's a lot of depth to his work, and it's kind of like a quasi reactionary, but not in the normal way, which is kind of returners, but into almost kind of like showcasing the best and the worst of that time. Sort of like showing a mirror up to it. And I think it's an interesting way of looking at the past, as opposed to, a standard reactionary move would be to be like, here's the Georgian period, and weren't they the best, and we should return to Georgian values and Georgian things or whatever. Well, I feel like he shows everything up, warts and all, but you can't help but like the figures that he shows at the same time.
Yeah, and if I'm going to say one more thing on Bride's Enemy, he does identify and depict the sort of superficiality and kind of grotesqueness of certain elements of that time. I mean, there's a section in the novel where both he and Julia Flight, his love interest, are both married to different people, and they're at a party at Bride's Hill, which has sort of become like a sort of casino type environment. And he remarks, I can't. Worse the effect of I don't know what's worse, her fashion or his money, or something like that, right? Like her arts and fashion, or his politics and money. So he was still aware of there being like a sort of sickness at the heart of British society, but I guess he's still nostalgic for it, because again, he's writing about events 20 years prior where
after basically long gone. It reminds me of like what's it, Carlyle on the French Revolution, where he's kind of like, it was a terrible thing, but the nobility were just so corrupt at that point that they deserved to go. Kind of thing. Like did the English aristocracy deserve to be destroyed in the way that they basically ended up doing? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that, but an interesting thought. Okay. So that's some of the kind of influences. Anything poetic in there as well, or is it? Do you just feel kind of like?
Yeah, I suppose the sort of poetic or supervillain origin story is that I was quite a severe stammerer in school. So I suppose that kind of made me retreat. Through that, I became very kind of bookish and very brooding. So I was probably reading. I'm not going to sort of say something wanky like I was reading at a higher level, but I was reading things that people weren't really interested in of my peer group. So I was reading things like young Werther, for instance, or I was reading a lot of kind of Goethe stuff. Just because again, I sort of. I suppose I kind of found affinity in it because it was, being a stammerer in the way that I was, maybe again, just made me very introverted, made me kind of take refuge in books, which I think is quite a normal thing for people who kind of go through that. Maybe not with books, but with something.
Do you feel like German Romanticism has sort of filtered into any of your work at all in that regard, or that was more
Yes.
like of the time or of that like time period for you? So
Yeah, I mean, I mean, in my novel, The Passenger, there's a mixture of things that are kind of fictionalized and things that are just depicted as are. So yeah, I mean, my protagonist in the novel is a stammerer. You know, so that's something that is autobiographical, not necessarily in terms of what happens in the story, but the very basis is to a degree. And then other parts of his backstory are, again, they're just kind of, I suppose, grand metaphors for other things in my life. But yeah, so it does seep through in some ways into the novel.
well, maybe let's talk about the novel, and we'll talk about the scene after that, as it's a good segue. Now, again, some writers, it comes to them in a dream. The idea starts from a conversation or a moment, or sometimes it's some kind of abandoned work that they've turned back to. Where did the kind of initial thoughts for the book come about? Was it a kind of a very machinated thing, or was it just like a growth or a shoot out?
See, it's a funny question to answer, because I actually don't know. I do have a few theories as to sort of origin points. All I remember is just one day. This came during the first lockdown. I don't know what happened. I just wrote the first chapter, and that being 3-4 years ago, the first chapter hasn't really changed since that point. It's been pretty much the same, just been sort of refined and whittled down a bit. I did have a funny moment quite recently though, where I listened to a song that I've always kind of listened to throughout my life, because I think my mum played it a lot, which is the song "Man of the World" by Fleetwood Mac. And I did kind of notice that a lot of the lyrics to that song do actually mirror. Maybe not events in the novel, but the general kind of feel of it. So I do wonder to what extent that had an effect. But no, I mean, it really started by me having a chapter for about a year or so, knowing that I think there was something there. That, because if you read the first chapter, then there's sort of there's a few quite strong characters introduced who aren't the protagonist. So I think I knew there was something there, and then it became a matter of the right friend in my life reading it, being very kind of kind and encouraging, and then from there it kind of just went over the hill and just became an obsession of rapture for the next 6 months until the first draft was done, and then from there it was another year and a half, 2 years before it was ready to be seen properly.
Do you feel the hand of the music on your shoulder as you're writing, or is it?
Yeah, I found myself forming these weird, like, parasocial relationships with my characters, where they felt like friends. A lot of the early chapters are sort of just this group of friends just kind of hanging out. And I found myself at points, I'd be either like dreaming about them, or if I took a day off from writing, I would kind of get this weird, like, I don't know if you get this experience where your friends are going to the pub and you say that, oh, I can't make it tonight, and you're seeing or you're hearing them out, and you're kind of like getting kind of like FOMO or whatever it's called. I was getting all these very weird experiences, like I was missing out on my friends hanging out and kind of forming memories without me, which is a very weird thing to go through, because I've never really got more than 3 or 4 chapters into writing a book before this one. Getting that deep into it, getting that kind of invested in the process, yeah, I mean, it kind of messed me up in a way for quite some time after.
Kind of like what's it called? Like almost like Phantom Limb, Phantom Friends.
It was weird. I spoke to a friend of mine who's also written and published novels in the past, and he told me that the process of finishing your first novel it's almost comparable to like postpartum depression, which is it's I kind of just shrugged it off, but yeah, it is kind of like that. I got that more with it being published rather than finished. this thing that I've held very closely guarded and very dear to me for the last 3 years is now out there to be, scrutinized and criticized and, liked, disliked. It's like I've now kind of relinquished control of it, and it's now out in the world, and there's not very much I can do to pull it in now.
There's a sort of weird freedom to that at the same time, but also kind of like the stress of criticism. But I want to go back to writing styles a second. And I mentioned I talked about the hand of the muse. When you feel moved to write, do you write until you can write no more, or do you chip away at the work?
I do it chapter by chapter, and it really depends on what's happening. When I do, actually, this is quite interesting. Actually, so the novel is about a novelist who is able who sort of goes through this process of months and months, even years of writer's block, and then he can write a novel in 3 or 4 days. And I'm the complete opposite of that. It takes me a very long time to write. So I kind of plan everything out meticulously. And this is based on a very good piece of advice I was given again by the same teacher who told me not to write until my mid-20s. Was understand that you're going to write more than one draft. So there's 2 things I'm describing here. There's writing and there's rewriting. On the former, I mean, yeah, I kind of I would at that time in my life, I would, I mean, to be honest with you, I would plan the chapter out through like kind of bullet points and beating, and then I would get quite drunk and just kind of write everything down, and then kind of untangle the mess of it the next day, and from there it becomes a process of kind of rewriting.
So I'd just like to say I'm a strong advocate for what I describe as the Dionysian form of creation, which basically involves like alcohol or coffee or I don't know. I often use like sugar. Mm-hmm. The way that I kind of get into, or like just personally, I definitely feel that the hand of the muse or some kind of force guiding me whenever I do creative work. But in two circumstances, one is either through this almost kind of like bacchanal, where you sort of like gear yourself up to it. Mm-hmm. So again, like I don't know, you have to sort of rev yourself. I know I find I rev myself up into that kind of moment, and that kind of work tends to be more kind of chaotic, but mm-hmm. again more vital. And you're kind of throwing stuff together, or mm-hmm. you're kind of slapping clay against the side with vigor. And the same with words, But there's a kind of like there is a softer, a softer form of creation as well. It tends to I don't know. It feels more like a waterfall to me, or something like that.
Right. Exactly.
Something flows from a point where you sort of work your way into the groove a little bit. They talk about finding the flow state. Mm-hmm. I think there's something true to that, where you can kind of warm yourself up. Like often you'll start attacking something, mm-hmm. and you just got to do something. You just got to throw some words down or some paint on the canvas, as it were, and then from there build it up, basically.
And that's why I draw the line between writing and rewriting it. Writing, if I do go into that state, sometimes, like I said, induced externally by alcohol or coffee, or in my case, nicotine. What I feel quite comforted in is knowing that I am going to rewrite it, that I am going to, whittle it down and refine it from. So I suppose it's a matter of, on one hand, you're kind of breathing life into something, you're putting your own energy and sort of vitality into it. And then the next day, with a kind of, sort of a bit more of a kind of sober mind, you're then kind of corralling it into place. I think both are necessary when you're a writer. I can't really speak for like painting or sculpting.
Have you ever tried any other creative mediums at all?
I tried music for a while.
Okay,
And
go on. I got to hear this. What instrument did you play?
so I
There's no shame. This is the no judgment
this is
channel. So
this is okay. This is a door straight into the 7-year-old mind of one SD Wickett. I was doing piano lessons when I was about 7 or 8,
okay, yeah,
and I would go to this teacher's house to do the lessons. And
yes,
one day her husband comes out and he's sort of watching me play, and he says to me that I have the perfect hands for playing the violin, which I took to
great.
mean I could just automatically play the violin to an incredible level. So I took a violin home with me, and for the next 2 weeks, there was just the most unbearable racket in my house because I would just assume that I was going to, like that story, is it Vivaldi who, like, the devil tuned his violin and he could play it
Right.
perfectly? Like Robert Johnson with the guitar. I thought that had happened to me, basically, where I would just be able to just throw my hands around violently along this violin and make beautiful music. Obviously that wasn't the case, and I kind of gave up after a week of just making the most insufferable noise and driving my parents to the point of madness. And then from that point, I realized I was simultaneously dyspraxic and tone deaf, so I kind of stopped quite early. But no, I mean, as far as like artistic pursuits beyond that point, it's only really been writing for me. I think I tried to play the guitar at one point because I thought it would help me meet girls, but no, I
Smash out Wonderwall at
I wasn't even that
party.
good. I wasn't even that good. I couldn't even like put together like, the chords of my fingers. It was just it was a mess. But I think I learned a good lesson, which is do something that you actually want to do rather than something that is a vehicle to getting laid. So yeah, I'm glad that I found my actual form, which is good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So going back to like the kind of the process. A lot of people I speak to talk about the importance of editing. Do you self-edit? Did you get another editor on it, or do you not edit at all? Is it just kind of the raw mind of SD Wickett?
Sure. So the only thing I really have to go off of here is the one novel I published. So it's not really like a tried and tested method for putting together a book. And this took 3 years. So it's not. Again, it made good insights into how to do it. But it's what happened to me was I had proofreaders. I had a proofreader. Sorry. Uh, uh, my friend's father who does it on like an amateur level did it for me. As far as as far as proofreading, just finding errors and making sure that they're not in the final product is that's one thing. As far as editing goes, I do self-edit. I mean, I had some help. A friend of mine on Twitter just goes by Sensitive Young Man. He went through the first sort of 10 or so chapters and pointed out, I suppose what would the word be, like continuity issues that may arise. But no, as far as the editing process, again, I do consider that to be in the process of rewriting, which is again part of the writing process, part of the creative process, is the editing that turns it into the second draft, third draft, fourth draft, fifth draft, or however many it requires. So for me, getting outside help in is simply a matter of identifying errors that I wouldn't be able to because I'm not reading it by the word, because I know what's there. I'm reading it by the imagery and by the prose and that sort of thing. So so the outside help that I do get in as and when is like it's very much like an objective thing. And then the rest, again, like I consider that to be the process of the process of rewriting, which is just the other end of the coin, that is the actual putting words on a blank page.
So tell me about the book itself. Like, I don't know how much you want to give away, etc., but maybe some kind of synopsis, some of the characters, maybe even, I don't know if you've got like a little passage I'm wondering. I should have asked you for this beforehand, but if there's anything you want to read out,
yeah. So
you're welcome to.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone listening to this wants to kind of try before they buy, the first chapter is on my Substack. So if you just go onto my Twitter, then it should be on there somewhere.
What is your Twitter?
It's just SD Wickett, as you can see on the screen. My handle is ESSTEE Wickett, so it's SD, but it's spelled out. And then it should be under the pinned tweet, which is the announcement of the novel itself. As far as the book goes, it's a bit of a difficult book to sell, I think, because it's, and by that I mean describe in a kind of marketing sense, because it's very long. It's not really about anything. It's more about somebody's life, just from their adolescence through to old age. And the title alludes to somebody who goes through their life feeling like all of the fortunes and misfortunes kind of just, ambushed them from nowhere. They didn't really feel like that they were guiding their lives. And so and again, this is not really a spoiler because it's in the first paragraph of the novel, but the protagonist is writing the story of their life from his deathbed. And things like the story begins at university, where he lives with two, I think you can call them the two comic relief characters, Richard and his sort of errand boy who's known as Fuxby. So sorry for swearing. Those two kind of provide a lot of the comic relief, also a lot of the heart of the story. There's also characters like mental figures, publishers, various lovers the protagonist has. I'm probably doing an absolutely terrible job of selling this. Again, it's not really my strong suit. But it's, again, ultimately it's about somebody who is just going through their life kind of as a passenger, as the title suggests, sort of grappling questions of fate and free will and consequences, all kind of building up to a decision. I'll just say this decision to take fate into his own hands.
Okay,
that's
interesting.
That's the kind of that's the blurb, if you will.
And kind of like, again, if you were to kind of tie it back to some of those kind of lighthouse figures, who would you say, like, if you've read X, then you'll like The Passenger?
Sure. So I think it's very similar to the novel Stoner by John Williams, where it's again it's somebody's life who kind of just somebody's life which seems on the surface to have just been a very kind of wasted and tragic and ultimately failed life, but under the surface is somebody who has a very sort of profound sensitivity and profound love of beauty and the arts. I think it has, at least I like to hope it has, again, the sort of the melancholy of the later war novels, the prose of, again, someone like Somerset Maugham. A book that is very influential on the novel is Of Human Bondage, which is similar premise in the fact that it's about somebody who is orphaned at a young age, kind of just trudging through life, trying to figure out, who they are as people kind of come and go, seemingly at random. So I mean, if I was to say three books that and I wouldn't be so arrogant as to compare myself to these three novels, but I think one can definitely feel the influence that they had upon me as a writer, and that would be, again, those three. So Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh, Of Human Bondage by Somerset Maugham, and Stoner by John Williams.
Okay, great. In terms of kind of like the generational thing, sorry for asking, Sam, but you must be, are you a Zoomer, or are you a young millennial?
I actually don't know. I read something yesterday on Twitter, and it was the litmus test is, do you recall 9/11? And I do. So
you do. Okay. I'm gonna put you down in the Zennial, maybe, like a
right.
young.
Yeah, I was born in 1996.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I'm 28.
Okay, but and I think that's an interesting time, because you've kind of got like you're like in the post-internet age. I'm a little bit older, so, open brackets, substantially older. So I remembered the sort of like the internet descending everywhere at 16. So there's like a definite kind of pre-internet life and childhood. Like, how do you feel like social media and the internet's affected your kind of writing and writing in general? Do you think there is a marked difference in, like, for example, one of the kind of classic memes is Zoomers have no concentration ability. They have to have everything subtitled and some kind of autistic video underneath the main video, so just to kind of keep them focused on the video at the same time.
Well, I suppose this does kind of go into like a zillennial thing, right? I mean, because I don't really remember the internet being a ubiquitous part of my own life until I was a little bit older. I still recall being a kid, and you couldn't use a phone and the internet at the same time. And if you called your friend while they were using the internet, you get this like deafening, ear-splitting noise come through the phone.
Yeah.
My opinions on sort of the cultural landscape that Zoomers are in is quite bleak. I mean, just for context, I mean the novel is not set in my time. I find the time that we live in to be profoundly uninteresting and uninspiring. At least in my fiction work. In non-fiction, I think there's plenty to write about. But as a in terms of story and narrative, I find the time that we live in extremely uninspiring, as sort of fodder for a novel. But the thing, the Zoomer thing. I mean, I almost can't blame them for the way that they are. Again, they're just products of the environment. I think they're products of parents who didn't quite know how to raise children in that environment, and so a lot of them are just completely tech brained, and that's kind of clearly had like a massive negative effect on them, the way that they learn and engage with the world, and even the way that they speak. I mean, I have like family friends and cousins who are of that age, and when you speak to them, they don't really have any they don't really have much to say about anything real. It's all very
It's interesting. Like, I have two younger sisters, both of which are Zoomers, and they are sort of free, but also kind of like trapped, and free in the sense that when growing up, there were kind of like shared cultural moments or things that would happen together. For example, like a new album would come out and everyone would listen to it. A new TV show would come out and everyone would be talking about it the next day. And I know this is a sample size of two, but my two sisters are very eclectic with their music tastes because they've got access to Spotify. They'll be listening to stuff from 1970s one day and whatever, like pop hit the next. So they like never has a generation had access to
I mean, that's kind of had
the greatest songs ever.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of had the unintended consequence of like there not really being any contemporary culture, right? I mean, if for instance, and this is one of the things that I do actually enjoy about the time that we live in, is that I am under no obligation to listen to whoever. I don't even know who these people are, but whoever's popular in charts currently, I'm not under any obligation to actually listen to their music.
I mean, I would slightly disagree with that. Like, I would say that there is culture in the same way that there was culture growing up, but when growing up, there was an inescapability to it, in the fact that because of limited media channels and I don't know, peer pressure, etc. Like, if everyone listened to the same songs or the same radio stations, but like has mainstream cultural production decreased from like 30 years ago? I would say it's, if anything, that there are more bands than ever, and like there's more music than ever being produced. but people just not controlled in the same kind of way. So this is what I'm saying, there is a weird kind of freedom, but there is a superficiality to that freedom as well, because of the lack of shared culture. Like there's sort of like a cultural individualism thing going on. There is this kind of like mega like there's a clique for everything, like again, growing up in the olden days, there were like 4 types of people, or whatever. There's kind of like people that listen to kind of alternative music, people that listen to pop music, do you know what I'm saying, etc. Well, now there's like 100,000.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. And again, it just means that whatever, because things still do aggregate at the top. I mean, I suppose my kind of window into this is my girlfriend, who listens. She's spent the day listening to I think her name's Sabrina Carpenter, right? I think she's having her kind of like moments at the top currently, or whoever else it may be. Things do still aggregate at the top, right? But again, if you don't like it, you're not under any obligation to listen to it. I mean, I almost all of the music that I listen to is pre 21st century, mostly even before that. I mean, I listen to a lot of classical music, and so I suppose it just turned culture into a buffet that contains everything.
Yeah,
going
that's
back
a good
history.
It's a weird kind of choice. Like I said, there's a weird freedom, but again, it's kind of like sort of slop at the end, entertainment at the same time, and you're engaging with it almost as some kind of like perverse voyeur, as opposed to being in it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like listening to like hippie music from the 60s versus going to Woodstock, for example, as a lived experience. That there is this kind of weird disconnect. So I do sort of feel bad for the Zoomers, in fact, in the sense that they are these kind of like also kind of like cultural ghosts, like cultural half men or whatever. Again, this is sort of ties into AA's point about Zoomers knowing nothing about any form of culture whatsoever. But does that give them like hope for the future? And do you see your kind of book inspiring a generation at all, or do you think it's for a different kind of person, and the fact you've set it in a different age, for example,
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I mean, the book's not really for anyone. It's I like to think it's a book that anyone can read and enjoy. And this is a good way of kind of segueing into kind of the arts chat in general, right? Because I mean, the more time goes on, the more years pass, this cohort is the one who you do need to not necessarily appeal to, but establish something that they can believe in, or at least going back to what you said earlier, pay attention to it for longer than a few minutes without there being subtitles and Subway Surfer clips underneath. It's I would what I would hope for somebody of that age or that cohort to find when reading it is to read it and to sort of consider language, because when I'm writing, much more so than when I'm speaking, I'm very I pay very close attention to the language that I use. I do try and use words as being simultaneously tools and toys to to sort of put in the right combination of things that can make a person feel something, which is I suppose that's just the essence of writing in general. And because I do find, especially now, the sort of all the brain rot memes about the stupid quotes that they say, the skibbity and that sort of thing. I mean, it's almost English being spoken by native English speakers as a sort of pidgin language.
I always think back to something like Clockwork Orange, because like
right, yeah,
sure. Like the like people like Madrugs and stuff like that, because the writer had based it off like Russian words. I don't know if you know this. Yeah, it's like, and he turned it into this kind of like semi-vernacular slang language, and
That's
but we
that,
sort
right?
of but we sort of have that, but it's just like meme slop language or African Americanisms or whatever, which have been transported across as part of kind of like American colonialism.
Yeah,
that's an interesting question. Do you feel like, because I don't know, I put my hand up. I said many a cringe thing, cringe catchphrase growing up as well. This is like a confession time, but obviously it's like a phase in my life. Do we think that for the Generation Z that is like, because again I think there's something deeper about the way they speak has changed. There's more of a gulf in language itself, and but I mean, how do you feel like that generation can even connect with literature in the same kind of ways, or is it just like a vernacular trend?
Sure. I mean, the problem with literature and books is that it's been outcompeted for general attention by basically every subsequent vector of entertainment, right? I mean, particularly the television and the internet being the two main ones, or even video games as well, right? So it's just with every new kind of benchmark in that kind of way of receiving entertainment, it does get kind of knocked further down the ladder. But there'll always be outliers, people who like to read. I don't know what they're reading. I mean, it might be utter sort of young adult or fantasy or sci-fi or sort of things that wouldn't really match the kind of
my Harry Potter fanfic. Yeah.
Right. Sure. The one thing that concerns me is this. I think I don't recall who said it, but it's basically the idea is that like as change occurs over time, the rate at which change occurs speeds up, right? And there are inventions or discoveries or developments that are basically like checkpoints in a video game, right? From which you can't go further back than that. Fire, for instance, the wheel, agriculture, the atom bomb, the printing press, and the internet, right? So what basically what we're seeing is a generation who were born on the other side of an insurmountable wall, where they were born after this checkpoint development or checkpoint invention. So the way that they even engage with the world is like entirely different to how, say, you and I or like our parents' generation would have. So really, I mean, and because they're still very young, they're not really in positions of power just yet. I mean, it still remains to be seen what will actually happen to them over time. But to bring it back to reading literature, and particularly my own, I think it's not in a format that is native to them, which is fine. But I think there are still outliers who do like to read. I mean, I've in things like Twitter Spaces and that sort of thing, I've encountered people who are like 16, 17 who are very knowledgeable about the liberal arts and history and literature and politics and that sort of thing. So I mean, I'm aware that they're outliers, but those people will exist regardless of what generations are like. So
that's interesting. Because I think one of my thoughts is the big mission of the 20th century was about the elevating of everyone to the highest level. So, for example, if you see things like the BBC, its original purpose was to educate the working man and to sort of civilize him and to raise him up to the same kind of level. So there's this weird kind of Rousseauian egalitarianism in it, but also it's the century of the low made high. It's kind of like elevating pop music to its kind of like most like high forms possible or whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
But is that, I mean, that isn't the norm for history, and like most culture has been of interest to a relatively small number of people within the generation. Maybe we're just seeing a return to that again, where most people just sort of go on with their lives as normal, supping up the slop, while a small number of cultural elites preserve the flame of the arts. I'm not saying this in a snobbish way, but more in a that I also am seeing that where the average person is less interested in the arts than ever before. While, for example, like for the boomer generation, everyone's interested in going to the theatre. Like the theatre is sustained by boomers, most of which are like middle class or lower middle class or even working class. And I feel like that, for example, has totally gone. There is no interest whatsoever in like higher art forms from even the middle class, most middle class people these days. So
yeah, and it's not necessarily again a snobbish thing, because the key word, the operative word that you use a few times there is interest, right? It's not necessarily a matter of capacity. It's just it's a matter of interest, and again, that's just, I mean, I would be in that position regardless of what Zoomers or millennials were like in terms of their level of cultural intake, because again, the book is not the native form of media for this generation, nor has it been for since the advent of the radio or the television. Right? It is an outlier form. And again, I'm fine with that. I mean, what would please me more than anything is just for literally just one person to read the novel and be moved by it.
I can just go back to those kind of the forms. Like I even feel like TV has attempted that. There was like the golden age of TV or whatever. The Sopranos, The Wire, or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Like yeah, etc. But again, I feel like they tried their best to elevate it to this kind of like higher level that it's a novel but it's on TV. But then there's sort of like a gravity to it at the same time. Like that people basically they're not really interested in that at all, and it's just through sheer force of will and good writing that those series have had success. But I think in the long run, TV will just be reduced down to popular slop. Basically, it's going to be the 1,000-year Love Island Reich on TV,
Sure.
etc. So like it's kind of like I think a lot of literary figures in the 20th century were concerned about the impact of these other cultural forms like hitting their turf. But like if I was you, I wouldn't be worried, because I just feel like gravity will pull them down and the book will still remain triumphant, albeit to a smaller group of people. And I think that is the one challenge is like funding and sustaining oneself as an artist. I was gonna ask you. I presume, do you have like a job at the same time to kind of fund what you do, or do you feel like that impacts too much on your work? How do you find that balance, and what would be your preferred situation?
So I suppose I work when I need to.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I've basically kind of put all my eggs in this basket where I haven't really sought a career out beyond this. So I work for a year here, 6 months there, save money, and then more often than not, it's like this kind of contractual work. And once I go below a certain threshold, I go back into work, and that's it. I mean, I view work as being a mere facilitator of what I do. It keeps the lights on while I pursue this.
Okay. How do you feel like what the current scene is like? Because like the kind of funding options are relatively like they're not too bad, I think, for like mainstream visual artists, but it seems like literature in particular is not well served for any form of remuneration, really, is it? So
Yeah. I mean, you can make a lot of money writing if you're like Sally Rooney or Rupi Kaur. But I mean, as far as
who are those people? Are they like what are they like?
I don't want to give you an aneurysm, so I won't share any of their work with you. It's antithetical to what we believe in, basically.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. There's like it's like the masses don't. They just want the slot. Basically, this is like
right. It's slop. Yeah, it's slop. I mean, yeah. I mean, I wish there were more funding options for writers in these circles. I mean, of course I do. You know, because I do stand to benefit from that. As somebody who's a producer in that regard. I think
I just think it's interesting that again, like there are regular grants and funds for visual artists, but there's just not that many for literature.
I mean,
but it's a sort of different field.
There are for writers, but they're all on sort of victim-based, like identitarian grounds. You know,
Right,
it'd be
okay.
like for BAME writers or gay writers or whatever's kind of
Trendy,
not us basically. So whenever I look into these funding options again, it's like everyone is in it like a giant neon sign saying like we aren't going to give you a penny, like you with a line underneath it in bold italics or what have you. I mean, again, there are some things. I mean, there's like the Passage Prize, for instance.
Well, they stopped. You see, this is
They say, right,
that was the only that was the only funding that I think was out there, and that's gone sadly. I think the life of a writer is the hardest of all, because of that, and also it's the feedback loops are much slower. So it takes you much longer to write a novel, for example. So but you can get immediate feedback for painting a picture or doing a sculpture.
Exactly. So for instance, so you and I met in person at the exhibition last year, right? And there is a version of writing that does have that instant feedback loop. For example, Columba had poems up on the wall, right?
Yeah, true. That's true. Yeah. I was thinking specifically novelists, though, is what I'm thinking.
So the general point that I'm making is one could go to that exhibition and they could see, oh, over here is Adam's work, and over here is Sam Wild's work, and here's yours, and there's Fendervilliers over there with the sculpture. And then if there was just like a novel on a table, mine is like 480 pages, I think. Again, like it could be 2 weeks to a month before I have any kind of meaningful feedback on that. The process of reading, digesting, and then formulating an opinion is, it's much longer. So it is, it is a difficult path to tread. But again, it's the method and the version of art that I feel like an otherworldly pull towards. So I'm almost like screwed in that regard. Not in terms of being a writer means that you're screwed, but like I will never not need that.
The romantic side of me always thinks that to be a true artist in the modern age is kind of like a Grail Knight. If you've ever read any of the Arthurian legends, but they just sort of go out to just try and find the impossible in some ways, like risking life on a daily basis, not having the kind of the comforts of home, living only for the quest, with no guarantee of success at the end. And I think that is the lifestyle of many of my friends, and yourself as well. I hope just for the glimpse of achieving something great off the back of it. So I can but applaud it.
Also I sort of love it as well, though.
No, exactly. It's like it's because I think it's part of who you are. Do you know what I'm saying? It's kind of like you need to be a certain personality type to be a knight, if that makes sense. It's kind of like you need to. But yeah, Right, I want to. We're almost at an end here, and I wanted to kind of wrap up with a few small questions at the end, if that's okay. Firstly, I know a lot of people listening in these spheres are interested in the kind of the world of literature or writing themselves. What advice would you have for them, just in general, or just anything you can give them? Words of encouragement would be great.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I'll say a few things on that. I mean, the first thing, and this is me relaying or paraphrasing advice that was given to me, was that if you are a prospective novelist and you're 2 or 3 chapters in, or in the early stages, and you're sort of wondering where it will go. I mean, I was very fortunate to have been told, and so hopefully I can kind of carry that on. Is that the most important thing you'll ever do as a novelist is finish the first draft of your first novel, because that puts you in the top percentile of people who have decided to be a novelist. You've finished that, and with that, on the other end of that again comes the sort of bit more grounded advice, which is when you are writing, just be comfortable in the fact that you are going to rewrite what you do. So have the energy in there, sure, but like don't just just know that you will refine it over time. But yeah, I mean, just have that feeling of like visualizing yourself writing the end and having that moment of kind of relief and accomplishment. And as somebody who's experienced that personally, I mean, it's it's a high that is it lasts days. So if you're taking the sort of the hatchling steps on that journey, then keep on, because it's a very very good feeling when you get to the end. And then just in general on the arts, I mean, if you have that inclination, do it. If you're capable of creating something where nothing was previously there, then you have basically like a superhuman ability. So just do it, play with it.
I often think there's something to do with the power of the will. It's life is filled with distractions and little side roads, etc. But it's the ability to turn something from your head into reality. Is, like you said, I think the superpower analogy is very, very strong, but it comes from, I very much believe it comes from the will and being able to just go and do it. One thing I wanted to share was I think there's 2 different ways of approaching creative things. Either diving into something for long periods of time infrequently, or to do a very small something every single day, just for like an hour. So it doesn't have to be like quitting your job or giving up our other commitments. I think, but the key thing, if you're doing the small thing, is to be consistent and to be regular with it, and you'll be amazed with what adds up in time. Right. Sam, any last bits from you in terms of well, I also wanted to say, where can we go and so you said we can check it out on Substack, first chapter. If we like what we read, where can we go and purchase it?
Yes. So if you want kind of everything in one place, that would be my Twitter. Which again, if you just type in SD Wickett, or my @ is ESSDEE Wickett. The pinned post is the novel itself. And then underneath that, in a sort of thread, is the first chapter on Substack. So yeah, if you read the first chapter and you like what you read, it's available on Amazon. And if you don't use Amazon, then you can message me directly, because I have copies that I'm selling externally as well. Yeah, so it's currently only Amazon and ebook.
We'll get the folio edition out next year.
I would love to do a hardcover edition. I think it would look great. I would love to do an audiobook too. I don't know if I would get into like legal issues with this, but I would love to use like AI to like graft like Jeremy Irons' voice and then do it.
Well, there's lots of people in the community that like to do voiceover work. So I'm sure if you're listening and you want to help out, please do contact Sam about that.
He had a gravelly smoker's voice then. Yeah.
that's what if you literally sound like between Jeremy Irons and Orson Welles, that'd be great. Okay, Sam, any last things before we finish up? And
no, just to reiterate again, if you have that that kind of bug within you that's drawing you towards any sort of artistic endeavor, then do it. Just do it, and that's all really.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I just want to thank everyone very much for listening. Hopefully, it's kind of inspirational thoughts for reflection. Please give your thoughts in the comments below, and share this with any bookish friends. We're coming up into Christmas, and now's the perfect time to give a friend or a loved one a present. And Sam's new book, The Passenger, is the perfect gift for anyone this Christmas. But I will say good night, and hopefully see you all guys very soon.
Thank you. Cheers.